Kia ora, Lara here, and today for May I Scraplift You, I am scraplifting Maree, who is also known as Kiwi Girl Scraps on Instagram, and I will link her Instagram name down below so you can go and check out her work, as well as other people that are scraplifting others during May I Scraplift You. So I've chosen this layout because I really loved the soft watercolour effects on the patterned paper and the sort of the stitching look that was there, but I really love the way that Maree had pulled out the embellishments to tie in with the colours on this patterned paper. So I also wanted to do it because I really wanted to have a go at creating my own background using this sort of technique and this sort of design. So I was thrilled when Maree said, yep, it's okay to scrap lift her. So all I've done here is I've sort of smudged the ink from the Close to My Heart ink pads on my mat, and I have got the sponge and then I've sprayed it with a little bit of water, which sort of gives that nice watercolour look as you smear it through on what I've just used here is the White Daisy cardstock. So I'm just going through colours and I'm using very similar to what was on Maree's layout. I have sort of stuck with those colour tones, the ones that I had in my ink collection anyway, that I felt went together quite nicely. But I really love how this came out, and I do think it's something that I will be playing around with a little bit more. We recently did this technique in a Close to My Heart album retreat, so it's quite fun to use it in a different context, but using the techniques and the skills that I learned in that sort of online workshop onto a layout that's different from what they were asking us to do or suggesting, but that just follows a different design. So I really enjoyed doing this, and I do think that it's something that I will do a little bit more. I do love patterned papers, but it's quite fun creating your own patterned paper or your own background from scratch in some ways. And I liked that this wasn't super mixed media, that it does have quite a bit, but it's not over the top. Now the stamp here, so in the stitching or in the layout that Maree had done on that patterned paper background, there is some cool stitches on it. And I knew that I had this stamp that I'd got a couple of years ago, I think, called Stitched Borders Essentials from Close to My Heart. I don't think it's still available, but you never know. If it is, I'll try and link that in the information below. Now to start with here, I stamped it using the Intense Black because that ink works better on sort of wet media, but then I realized that I probably need to let the paper dry a little bit more, and so what I did sort of off screen is I got my heat gun and I just sort of dried the front of it and the back before I carried on doing the stamping. So two of the stamped images, that sort of zigzag stitch, do look a little bit paler, but it doesn't matter, it just looks like I used a grey thread rather than a black thread. And then I've just pulled out some of the different stitching lines from this stamp set, and I'm stamping them along each of the colours, so it sort of makes it look like the colours have been stitched onto that background. When the stamp is bigger or longer than the ink pad itself, I will often ink onto the stamp rather than the stamp onto the ink pad. Now the photos that I'm going to be adding into this layout are two photos where a recent trip that we went up the west coast of New Zealand. Now Maree is a New Zealander who I'm scraplifting, however she is living overseas. So yeah, and I've seen some of her layouts. She's had some sort of New Zealand scenery and stuff like that tied in there, so I thought it was quite fun pulling in sort of a location within New Zealand into this scrap lift as well. But these photos are up the west coast between Greymouth and Punakaiki at a little batch that we were staying at. The photos do look rather tropical, but don't be deceived, the water was rather cold. I used this as a moment in time example with my students at school, where the idea was to show not tell, so I had to describe an experience from my recent break instead of a story like and then we went to the and then I was trying to get the students away from that, just to sort of pinpoint one moment in time and to describe that experience. And part of this experience was the icy cold fingers of the water was some of the words that were used in there, as well as that gasping for breath at the end when you realise you've held your breath because something's so cold. Anyway, it doesn't look like that. It does give you the tropical vibes, and looking at these photos, it does look a little bit like that. And when I was in the sunshine, it did have a nice tropical feel. and you can sort of see some flax there, which in there, but there are palm trees and different things around this place as well. So around along those coloured lines, Maree had included some embellishments that fitted with the colours. Now I'm going to be stamping these, and I've used a few different stamp sets. One is a stamp set called Counting My Blessings, which was part of Business Builders with Close to My Heart. So Close to My Heart makers have the opportunity to sign into Business Builders, which has got lots of tips and tricks for building a business, as well as some creative projects, and getting sort of those exclusive stamps like that's quite a bit of fun, really. So I've pulled in that. I have also used another floral stamp set, which was called, Mothers Are the Best, which is quite handy to have that out because Mother's Day is coming up at the end of this week, so I need to keep that aside ready to use that, as well as a stamp set called Hawaiian Hibiscus Occasion. So this did come out a couple of years ago, and so did these other ones, so they're probably not still available, but recently on my sort of closed group page I have been recommending stamps to get, and I haven't quite got onto the florals yet. So I did talk about textured backgrounds and alphabets and sort of words and phrases and sayings that you might use for journaling and stuff, but florals are another definite keeper. Even though they're not available anymore, they're ones that I go to again and again, especially when you get a floral or foliage type stamp that you really enjoy using. So I'm sort of stamping each of these using the same colours that I'd used to create those watercolour backgrounds, but stamping them directly on. So it's quite handy using the same colours in those sort of watercolour stripes that I did, that I can then use them too in the stamps. So what I'm doing is going through and stamping a few of the images in a few different colours, and I noticed that Maree had sort of done 4 kind of clusters, so I've pulled those out to use the colours sort of in 4 different places on there. So I knew that I was sort of going for those sort of soft pinky colours. I think it was ballerina, and then nectarine, a little bit of lagoon, and then I think I used mint as my colour options there as well. And then I fussy cut around those, and I've stuck some of them down flat, and then I've also popped some of them up onto some 3D foam so they lift up a little bit. The stamps I'm stamping now are just another couple, and these are the ones from, and it was a die cut set, so it was quite handy being able to pop them through the die cut. Oh no, I think I fussy cut these ones, sorry, I tell a lie. So these are again from the Mothers Are Best set. And I'm just going to fussy cut around them, but I'm going to end up using the 2 tones. So I decided I wanted them using the lighter of the 2 colours and then the darker, and I did one mistake there. I do quite like how that looks, but I'm not going to use that in the end. So I've done the light pink and the dark pink, and then I've used the yellow with the orange for 2 of those sort of spaces there. And just fussy cutting nicely around the edges of both of those, and I'm going to pop those into those couple of spaces, very similar to what Maree had sort of the positioning of anyway in her layout that I am scrap lifting. It's been quite fun using the technique that I'd mentioned before from the album retreat, and then also pulling in the same coloured stamped images around it. That was another thing we did in one of our layouts at the album retreat, but it's also something that I've noticed quite a few scrapbookers doing when you're sort of hanging out on Instagram and looking around, using those same colour tones in different places around the page. So I did just back those those photos with some white daisy cardstock and then a few pieces of paper from my scraps paper collection. Now it's time to actually stick down all those little embellishments that I stamped. And my glue wasn't playing games, it's rather empty glue, so I do need to leave that upside down. And just resorted to poking a lot of these through my Xyron, and it just makes them into adhesive in the background there. So just sort of poking them through and trying not to waste too much of it. I was thinking recently that this Xyron refill seems to have been lasting an awfully long time, and then it ran out. So I'm on my last one in my sort of stash in that, so I do need to look out to get some more of that. There, it works quite nicely for smaller fiddly kind of designs often. Normally I just use that Tombow glue that's there, but I haven't. I had some left over from window not windows, I'm trying to think of the name. Yeah, they are kind of. So it was a circle window card, shaker card that we'd made. We'd use the circle shape from the outside, and so I'm just using those foam dots or those foam squares that are left over there to mount some of the florals up a little bit higher than the rest of them. So tucking in the leaves behind, just leaving them nice and flat, and playing around them. So some of those leaves are sort of the outline, and I think the idea of the stamp was that you would do the darker lines over them, over some lighter lines, so that you would have a more defined edge to some of those leaves. However, I have done them separately because I just wanted that soft and dark look to be peeking out there as well. And I realised that I hadn't fully fussy cut that flower, but I was able to do that on the backing from that adhesive sheet there. Just going to leave those two till a little bit later. Now that I've got these ones stuck down, I'm going to go through sort of some leftover stickers that I had, and I found this one here that said tropical, and it had vibes. So this is from a recent set from Close to My Heart, and I think you can still get this one, but it just, again, it was a happy accident find kind of thing, where it had the title that fitted nicely with the colours that I had been using. So Maree's layout, the title colours actually fitted with the colours that are on that background paper. I didn't quite achieve that look, but I'm really happy with how it tied in the top part of the layout into the bottom of what I was doing here. So adding in those different little flowers that I had also found, and then I felt like I was missing something else, so I did grab out some of the stickers that kind of fitted. Maree did have a bit of wording up on the top left photo, however I've sort of tucked that into the one on the right. I'm not going to be pulling in the ribbon or the twine like Maree has used, but I am going to bring in some other leaves and some other bits and pieces a little bit later on. So I have typed up my journaling on my typewriter, and now I've just cut those strips out and stuck them down, or I'm sticking them down on that piece, and I'm just cutting off the leftover bits at the end. I also cut some of the journaling in parts just so it can tuck in there and fit in there a little bit nicer. I had a little bit more to say perhaps than Maree had for hers. And so I've said that on our first day at the beach up the west coast, we took the opportunity to freshen up in the plunge pool. The views were tropical, but the water wasn't, which backs up a little bit of what I was saying. The nature of the Kiwi Batch that we were staying at is that the water is sort of from rainfall, so it relies on there having been lots of rain to have a good amount of water. So we were told that there was only a couple of drums up there, and that we weren't told, but the owner sort of mentioned that it's probably not a good idea to use heaps of water essentially, so we limited our showers and thought on this first day, hey, why not get in the plunge pool? It was rather sunny and gorgeous. So we did. It did end up raining later in the day, so it was actually quite a wet and rainy afternoon, but the morning was absolutely gorgeous. So now I'm just going through and adding in what could look like paint splatters. So when I went back and had a look at Maree's layout, it looked like she had some nice wee splatters in the background there, which I hadn't added in at the start. So what I've used is a stamp called Perfectly Imperfect Patterns, and I've just inked those up using the colours nearby and sort of created those splatters. The other thing I've also pulled in is some little hearts from a set called nope, I haven't pulled in the little hearts. It was something I thought about, but I didn't actually go there. I just carried on using the splatters, but cleaning the splatters up and then using a different ink colour. Here's some close-ups of the layout I've created. Thanks again, Maree, for letting me scraplift your gorgeous page. Please check below for other people joining in on May I Scraplift You, and also to see the link to Maree's Instagram feed. Hey, thank you for watching.